Good morning. My name is Matthew Toland. I'm a member here, and as Jay said, I'm the chair of the Humanist team at UUCQC. The team's mission statement states that the Humanist team of the UUCQC is dedicated to providing a welcoming home for humanists within the greater Quad Cities. Humanism embraces a progressive philosophy of life without supernaturalism. We will provide educational opportunities, resources, and support. I'd like to talk about why I think humanism is important and use some examples from recent events, and maybe you'll agree with me. Some of the things I'm going to talk about are Darwin, Google, rappers, and dinosaurs, and maybe a couple other things along the way, and not necessarily in that order. The first one is International Darwin Day. February 12th is Darwin's birthday, 1809. This new humanist holiday was started in 2011. It is partly to celebrate the English naturalist Charles Darwin and his contributions to the collective knowledge following his discoveries that eventually led to the theory of evolution. This theory challenged the belief that the reason plants and animals exist in their current form is due to an evolutional process, not because God or gods or some other supernatural being wanted it to be that way. The logo has an image of a bird here. Can anyone tell me what that bird is? It is a finch. In fact, it is a Galapagos finch. It's a rather unremarkable bird, but its difference between the finches that Darwin had seen in other parts of the world sparked the question, why? Why is this finch different than the others? The website for the International Darwin Day has resources where you can help you encourage your leadership to adopt and legislators to adopt International Darwin Day in our community and other information and news. Another reason for Darwin Day is to celebrate the other countless contributions from scientists from around the world and across the ages. Why is this important? Let's look at a couple of examples. On November 24th, 2015, the Google Doodle, does everyone know what a Google Doodle is? Google, the website, from time to time has a special thing on their website to celebrate artists or authors or holidays or other interesting things going on. Sometimes they're interactive, little games or things you can do, and sometimes it's just a link to more information about that important topic. On the 24th of November in 2015, their Google Doodle looked like this. Isn't that cute? Some people didn't think it was so cute. This is from a website called vocative.com, which takes news stories and gives them a little more information. So talking about the same Google Doodle, we can go down here and see some of their reactions. Google pushing the evolution lie. God created the heavens and the earth. Google, why do you want to make a monkey out of me? Another recent event that might explain why I think Darwin Day is important comes from the rapper B.O.B. About a week ago, he started to try to prove that the earth is flat using his Twitter account. He used this photo and many others to try to prove his point. He says, the cities in the background are approximately 16 miles apart. Where is the curve? Please explain. So he's up on a hill, and as you can see over here and then over here, there are some outlines of cities. His Twitter battle with the scientist and superhero Neil deGrasse Tyson made international headlines. Tyson explained that he wasn't high enough to see the curve, and the debate continued as the rapper explained that the only photos that we have from Earth from space are from NASA, which of course is true. And he explained that this is some kind of conspiracy where NASA, they're trying to trick us into thinking that the Earth is round so they can continue the space program and have monetary gain from that. I have to admit that I'd never heard of BOB prior to this media event. However, he does have 2.31 million Twitter followers and millions more fans, most of whom are young, impressionable people who might believe his claims. For most people, I think that this event was entertainment, but for many, many more, it's misleading and possibly harmful. I would like to point out that the flatness of the Earth is not quite as highly contended as maybe evolution still is. Most religious organizations have accepted this fact and have moved on. But as a pop quiz, does anyone know in what year the Catholic Church conceded that Copernicus was right, the Earth was indeed round, and it did revolve around the sun, and then they apologized that they had tortured and shunned him? 1997, nearly 500 years after the discoveries. But still, progress is progress, right? Sometimes it just takes 500 years to really get it to sink in. As a museum professional, one of my favorite, I don't know if that's the right word, examples is the Creation Museum in Petersburg, Kentucky, which might sound like a little outpost somewhere, but it's only minutes away from downtown Cincinnati, Ohio. It educates children and adults on their own interpretation of scientific discoveries. If you look at their website, which we have up here, it has a list of their exhibitions, humans, about dragons, insects, acts of worship. It is a religious museum. Dinosaurs, human skeletons, more dinosaurs, biblical interpretations. My favorite here is an exhibition showing humans and dinosaurs living side by side. Not only peacefully, but as dinosaurs as kind of pets of humans. It goes on to let you experience Noah's Ark and explain how animals were spread throughout the world. Many would call this pseudoscience, but I feel that that implies that there's science involved. These are just untruths that are being presented as science and fact, and that has an impact. Finally, I have one more report. There's an article here from Slate.com. This map shows public and private schools in the United States that are teaching creationism. Some of them do, in fact, most of them receive federal and state money. Thousands of students are taught this curriculum every year in their public and private schools. Creationists are doing a good job of getting their message out and influencing people. But what are we doing? Clearly, the battle is not yet won. I think what gets in the way of understanding evolution is the word theory. A scientific theory is not the same kind of casual theory that one might have day to day. Scientific theories is different from a statement like, I have a theory that creationists might not understand the word theory. Scientific theories are facts, are proven. You might recently have seen news that there's evidence of gravitational waves which have been discovered, which further prove Einstein's theory of relativity. This science was once thought unmeasurable. And now I'd like to do a little science experiment here. And so in a moment, not yet, I'm going to ask everyone to stand up. And when I count to 3, I'll give you the cue, and everyone, I want you to jump up in the air. So let's have this half of the room jump up and safely land in the spot where they started, and this half of the room float off to the ceiling. The first one to touch the ceiling and return back to your seat, I will personally give you $1 million. Because I'm just trying to prove the theory of gravity. It's just a theory, right? Okay, are we ready to do the experiment? You don't have to stand up. I think I've proved my point. theory doesn't necessarily mean what we think it means. So what does this all mean? To me, it means that Darwin's theories have been around for nearly 170 years, but clearly the work is not done. It means that new discoveries are being made every day, and we have to be educated enough to understand them and open-minded enough to consider them. There are other implications too. As ignorance persists, it opens the door for more ignorance. Laws that openly discriminate against women, racial and ethnic minorities, the poor, LGBTQ people, and many others find their way into our society. Ignorant and hateful people find a pathway to becoming politicians, pundits, and presidential candidates. If you'd like to learn more about humanism, you can talk to Reverend Wolin, to one of our friendly neighborhood humanists, many of whom are here today and every Sunday. You can attend a humanist team meeting or program, read about humanism on your own or with our Happy Human Book Club, which meets monthly, or find many resources at the American Humanist Association website and many, many other ways. The thing is, humanists and atheists aren't so different from everybody else. We are also looking for answers and ways to understand this complex and ever-changing world that we share. However, we believe there are ways to understand it using science and reason and without supernaturalism and myth and magic. Thanks for listening.
So I think it's an interesting thing when we look deeply into the past. We remember events analytically, looking back in the broad scope of our lives with historical context. Or we can sometimes try and remember history as we felt it at the time, in the present moment. And I was trying to consider this as I thought about my religious journey. I have, as I said when I first came to this congregation, that I called my theology a mystical humanism. And I tried to think about how I reached that point and where I might possibly go from there. Now, I grew up, as many of you know, in the Jewish religion. I was steeped in the theology of suffering. Part of the Jewish scriptures, of course, focused on God's anger at the Jews for not having right action, not following the rules. Other parts focused on God's blessings to the Hebrews for taking right action and following the rules. Other parts of the stories showed God causing suffering or giving blessings, no matter what the actions of the Hebrews were. So as a child, this was very confusing, right? And looking back with knowledge, it's easy to see this is a story of a history of a people and how they tried to understand the world that they lived in with the knowledge that they had at the time. But in the moment, I was just worried that every action that I might possibly take could bring cataclysmic change to my world. So this would be my analytical, honestly, version of looking back at my early religious life. But in a moment, in the moment experience happened when I was a young child on the high Jewish holiday of Yom Kippur. And on this holiday, you are supposed to fast for the entire day. But on this one day, I was really, really very sick. But I was still going to be dutiful, and I went to temple, and I suffered through it. Without telling anyone, for fear of upsetting what I believed at that time in my life were the laws of nature. God would write in the book of life, if I did something wrong, I would not live the next year. So later in that afternoon, my grandfather found me curled up in the corner of my bedroom, and he coaxed out of me what was wrong. And this was somebody who was an Orthodox, very religious Jewish person. And he insisted that I have something to eat in order to regain my strength. Now, I was terrified at this point that God would not enter me into the book of life for next year, but my grandfather, in his wise way, quoting the Talmud, or just making it up as he went along, I was never really quite sure at the time, and he said, God does not want you to suffer. Healing oneself or healing another trumps all the other laws of God. So this comforted me. I thought, okay, there are some rules out there maybe I'm not aware of yet. But of course then, I thought to myself, well, was I special to God? If not, God didn't want me to suffer. God wouldn't want anyone to suffer. And if that was true, why was there so much suffering in the world? So many questions obsessed me at this point in my life. And just as the character in Elie Wiesel's book, Dawn, which you should know, all of Elie Wiesel's books were required reading in my household as a young child. Most of his books are on the Holocaust. And his character in there said, and I quote, "So many questions obsessed me. Where is God to be found? In suffering or in rebellion? When is a human most truly human? When they submit or when they refuse? Where does suffering lead them? To purification or to bestiality?" End quote. And as I grew, I continued to experience and observe suffering in the world. And the traditions of my birth religion at that time did not answer for me how to live in the world that I lived in the time that I lived in it. And so the first answer I came to for these questions was that God was not to be found. And I found my way to the Ethical Culture Society of New York, where I first came in contact with a Humanist Manifesto. And it is called a Humanist Manifesto, not the Humanist Manifesto, because they knew even then, the writers of it, that as new knowledge, as we became aware of new knowledge, it would be superseded. And it was superseded twice. The Humanist Manifesto number 2 in 1973 and Humanist Manifesto 3 in 2003. I always find it interesting, actually, that we humans are such creatures of habit that, each of them had to be written in a year ending in 3. I don't, it's like on the anniversary, we must write, a new one on the anniversary. Anyway, but I think it is an important historical, maybe even a sacred document for us, as is a witness to our free and responsible search for truth and meaning. That's one of the principles of Unitarian Universalism. And although we didn't have that principle written down in any document in 1933, breaking from tradition based on our experiences in the world was and is a cornerstone of Unitarianism. Theodore Parker, a famous 19th century transcendentalist Unitarian, looking back on his life in his later years, stated, and I quote, "So wondrous is this human life, not ruled by fate, but providence, which is wisdom married unto love, each infinite." End quote. I do think it is actually important to note that 13 of the 34 signers of this manifesto were Unitarian ministers. And the preface of the document states, and I quote, "The time has come for widespread recognition of the radical changes in religious beliefs throughout the modern world. The time is past for mere revision of traditional attitudes. Science and economic changes have disrupted the old beliefs. Today's humanity's larger understanding of the universe, our scientific achievements, and deeper appreciation of kinship have created a situation which requires a new statement of the means and purposes of religion. Such a vital, fearless, and frank religion capable of furnishing adequate social goals and personal satisfactions, may appear to many people as a complete break with the past. While this age does owe a vast debt to traditional religions, it is nonetheless obvious that any religion that can hope to be a synthesizing and dynamic force for today must be shaped for the needs of this age. End quote. This was 1933 when this was written. We as a country were in the deep throes of an economic depression. It was the suffering of the people that led to a radical change in religion. The old ways did not provide answers to the people as to how to live in the world at that time. And some of these words, I think, still ring true for us as well. Unitarian Universalism is a synthesizing and dynamic force. And just as then many of us found our way to Unitarian Universalism in recognition of the radical changes in our now postmodern multicultural world, unsatisfied with ancient creeds and unanswered questions of our deepest yearnings for connection and meaning. And we have come together to find a new way of being, synthesizing older traditions with newer wisdom. And we're now reinventing ourselves. We're always reinventing ourselves as we integrate older humanism and newer humanism with our pluralistic theological perspective. And I invite you to remember Darwin's lesson was that evolution happens through adaptation to the environment that we are in. Those who survive are those who adapt to the new environment. Now, this first manifesto had 15 affirmations. This is the one written in 1933, and in some ways, I personally think it was probably a little naive in its belief in the power of humanity to progress, seemingly to ignore some of the deficits that humanity carries within itself. It recognized that humanity has the power to create, and we do have the power to create great things. We have seen that over time. But it also seemingly forgot that we have the power to destroy as well. After the Holocaust and the use of the atom bomb in World War II, the second manifesto was much longer and much more nuanced. And although both rejected the supernatural, the second manifesto left open the possibility, stating, nature may indeed be broader and deeper than we now know, end quote. And I admit that my spiritual and religious journey has evolved as well, as I now call myself a mystical humanist, as I have found God, not in the traditional anthropomorphic sense, of course, but recognizing with wonder the spirit of life, the spirit of love, in my awe of nature, in the relationships that we all build with each other, in the recognition of synchronization, and in the interdependence of all things. And so I wonder where the congregation, where humanity as a whole will evolve to religiously from here. We are always evolving and adapting. I still remain grounded, though, with 2 feet on the ground in the here and now, just as all of the 3 manifestos focused on. As in the Humanist Manifesto wrote, and I quote, "Humanity is at last becoming aware that we alone are responsible for the realization of the world of our dreams. What we have within ourselves, the power for its achievement. We must set intelligence and will to that task." End quote. So let us go forth. Let us go forth and have faith that we can learn from our past mistakes and use the wisdom of our experiences to recognize that, as the famous Unitarian humanist John Dietrich said, and I quote, "Humanity is not only of worth, but of supreme worth, and that we are an end and not just a means." May it be so.